Committee room. We are going to, we have recessed to the committee room. We're going to begin our discussion on the manager report of the facilities update. And to begin things, I'd like to introduce Assistant Village Manager Mike Baker, who will lead us through the balance of the discussion. Mr. Baker, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and the community. I have a few brief introductory comments, and then we'll allow time for council questions and discussion. I'm going to walk through information that's on the board here, starting on the far left. For those of you who have been following along, this will look very familiar. We are in a process right now that will establish a long-term plan for the sustainable maintenance of two of the village's major facilities, the police station and Village Hall. In the green boxes over there, you can see a summary of the process that has been laid out, which began in September of this year, where we spent some time discussing the issue and some of the specific challenges and problems that we face with these buildings. In October, there was discussion about resources, the direction received from the council on which resources to consider as we move forward and establish a budget. And you can see a summary of the issue here. And then to touch a little more on resources, based on the direction provided, we're approaching this project focused on existing revenues and existing sites, meaning property on the Village Hall Civic Center site. Based on existing revenues, we've established a total project budget of $16 million, with $1.5 million coming from the Asset Forfeiture Fund, and an estimated $14.5 million bond issue. It's made up of the three revenue sources that you see listed there at the bottom of the board. More recently, we went through a process of reviewing proposals for architectural services and entered into a contract for pre-design services with Williams Architects after that competitive process. And in the last month and a half, Williams Architects, working with the village, has conducted on-site assessments and preliminary space programming. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bushhouse right now, who is the managing principal and president of Williams Architects. He's been doing architectural work on municipal facilities for over 30 years and has extensive experience on a range of different types of improvements for municipalities, including a number of public safety facilities. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bushhouse.
Thank you. Glad to be here tonight. Hope we can give you all the information you need and answer any questions you may have. As Mike indicated, ourselves, our architects, and our engineers did review the two facilities, the police station and the Village Hall, reviewed the basic construction, reviewed the systems, that's the heating system, cooling, electrical, plumbing, fire suppression systems, along with our engineers. And they have all come back and indicated that substantially they agree with the report that was done in 2012, indicating that these facilities, though in many ways structurally sound, have some real issues that should be addressed very, very soon or further out, but still substantial things that need to be dealt with. Overall, the heating and cooling systems on both buildings are, well, I think it's fair to say the taxpayers have gotten their money's worth. Your boilers are about 60 years old. That's very old boilers, and they heat both buildings from a remote building down at the end here. And those should be replaced. They are going to be increasingly problematic maintaining them. Other aspects of the heating system are also past their useful life and should also be considered for replacement, especially if any changes to the buildings are considered. The lighting systems, as you see in this room, do not have any of the energy-saving features which are now required. There's no LED lights, there's no automatic controls. All of those things save enormous amounts of electricity in modern facilities, are required by current codes, and are highly recommended for all commercial buildings. Plumbing systems are operating, but there are significant fixtures and portions of them that are past their useful life and are also recommended to be replaced in the near future. Electrically, there are numerous aspects of the systems that are also past the end of their useful life. There's inadequate emergency generator power, an older generator, and all those are also recommended to be replaced at your pretty much your earliest convenience. So the backdrop of the project is you've gotten good use out of these buildings. The police facility is a good, solid, sound brick and block structure, very structurally in good shape. It was designed to do what it is doing. It's an essential facility, which police stations are, which means they have to have a higher level of structural capacity, both for wind loads and others, so that they can be still standing and operational if the weather gets pretty tough. The idea is those essential buildings should be the last ones to go down and hopefully never go down. So, and the Village Hall here is a repurposed warehouse, I believe you folks have indicated. And while it's certainly standing reasonably well, it has certainly been repurposed and reworked over the years. And it has it was built under different requirements, not as restrictive and heavily requiring the structures that a police station does. So with that, we agree with the previous studies that indicate that you have substantial items to get at here at these two facilities in the near future, and that will require significant investments. Next step is we work significantly with staff, both at Village Hall and police, talking about space needs. And we spent considerable time talking about staffing and talking about the spaces they use and need. We've also in the past have toured other facilities. If it helps the board to know, we are currently also planning and programming 4 other major police stations in the Chicago area. And so this is something we are very current and working very hard on. That said, I'll say the Downers Grove staff has been particularly open to and very excited about looking at space needs in very efficient ways. And that has allowed us to come up with space programs for both police and Village Hall that I would say is not the standard old technique of space utilage. They've been much more interested in and willing to and excited about actually multi-using spaces so that rooms can be used for different functions at different times. Certainly taking full advantage of technology and working with the mobility of the workers so that we can shrink spaces while still making them very high quality and allow a lot of flexibility for teams of people to work together appropriately in different work areas, meaning very focused workstations when they need that, teaming areas when they need that, private office or conference room when that is necessary. And so we've approached this, and I would say in a much more economical and efficient approach that I'd say really is looking more like private industry in the approaches they're taking to maximize their utilage of their buildings and allowing their workers to have different places and opportunities for how they work to keep them working efficiently, but it really also at the same time really does control the square footage that would be necessary. So that said, in summary, the space program indicates that we need the police stations now about 26,700, and we are estimating at this time a range of 38,000 to 47,000, so that certainly is an increase due to the fact that the police department has grown significantly since the building was built, I think, in 1975, something like that. 79, thank you. So certainly there's been tremendous changes in population and employee growth in the police department in those years. So they have significantly overgrown that facility during that time. At the Village Hall, interesting enough, sort of the reverse has happened in that you have about 50,000 square feet here, of which 30,000 is fairly active areas used by staff and the public. And we're estimating that to maintain active staff areas and areas used by the public, not counting council chambers, they would need more in the range of 16,500 to 21,300. So both of those numbers are certainly less than the 30,000 that we actively are using now, and quite a bit less than the 50,000 square feet the building has. However, in our evaluation of the building, some very good things came from that, in that you have a good portion of this building more to the east that is currently being used for archives. It's also being used for long-term storage of police evidence, which could continue to do so very effectively and require only the most modest of changes to allow it to continue to do that very well for you. Therefore, we could focus the area of renovation in this building to be the areas that are actively used by staff and the public when they visit. So therefore, we are looking at a a zone in this building to remodel that would be in that 16,500 to the 21,000. So that would even be less than what's currently actively being used now. So the good news is, like I said, you have an organization that is certainly very focused on and excited about multi-use spaces and highly efficient use of space, really in important ways, learning a great deal from private industry and taking advantage of the technology that your staff and village use. And in fact, I can tell you that talking to your police department, describing how many files that they currently are using, I can clearly state that they seem to have less active paper files moving around their department than any police department I've ever worked with. So they are well down the path of significantly automating their paper and information, not paper, but information storage, so that we really can keep them a very efficient facility. So those are the basics of how we've looked at the space programming and have come up with a program range that staff is very comfortable with at this point, and certainly as times move forward, we would continue to refine that to be more exactly on task with what they need. So that's kind of what I was thinking there, and you were going to talk about the options and other
Absolutely.
aspects.
Yeah, just wrap up the staff comments and allow time for questions. Obviously, as we move into consideration of options, it's focused on reuse of existing facilities. And you can see three basic options identified here that really increase in scope as you go from A through C. A talks about just simply replacing the systems. You can see a list on the board over there to the right, which lists on the left-hand side the maintenance needs within each of these buildings. And that's what Mark spoke to earlier, some of those requirements for upgrading, replacing systems. And that's really what option A would focus entirely on. Option B would then expand a little bit and say, in addition to system replacement, look at remodeling of one or both of the buildings. And then option C takes that a step further and says, in addition to remodel, consider an addition to the police station to resolve some of the space needs constraints in that facility. And at this point, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you. Really, as we go forward, if there are any questions or comments, we'd be happy to answer them. And we're also simply looking for council concurrence on the strategies and options that we laid out.
And let me thank you, both of you, for that. Let me just go back to the ask, if you will. If you could maybe elaborate on what it is that you're looking for from the council tonight, just to make sure that obviously everyone can ask whatever questions they want, but at some point in time we make sure that we're providing the additional guidance and direction so that we can try to stay on track, if not even accelerate the timetable that's up over your shoulder there.
Absolutely. When we come back in February, and we have been meeting and discussing this topic at least on a monthly basis since September, in February, we would expect to have conceptual plans on one or perhaps more of the options to present. In addition, we'll have preliminary cost estimates, and we'll have a list of which of the issues that you can see over there, both maintenance and operational, are addressed by the options that are presented.
Okay.
So at this point, we are moving forward with the assumption that these options should be developed as described here, and based on the set of strategies that you heard Mark generally make reference to.
All right.
These are the strategies that we're using to work toward these options, and that's really the concurrence that we're looking for from the council that would allow us to present conceptual plans in February.
Sure, and my guess is that's really what everybody wants to see, is the stuff that we're going to see in February that are conceptual designs with dollars associated with them, and some indication of what falls off that list or doesn't fall off that list based on each of those options. So really what you're looking for tonight is concurrence that that's the step we got to be moving towards for next month. And then, of course, affording anyone any questions that they may have at this juncture. I'm already thinking about what I want to see in February. Commissioner White?
Okay. First, I'd like to just make it clear that each of us has had a private briefing with senior staff on this. So what we heard this evening is only part of our investigation and study of the process so far. I'll state for the record that I fully support all 5 strategies. And I very much want to see more detail and cost estimates on all three of the options. And my mind is open on all three of the options, looking at the target goal of staying within the budget that we initially recommended. And I'd like to compliment staff because I believe they've definitely followed the guidance that I feel that we gave them. And I too am looking forward to next month to finding out how many of the maintenance and operational needs can be accomplished within applying these strategies, using these options within the resource constraint that we've given them. And then there'll be no final decision from me, no final conclusion until I see what the options are, what the costs are, and which of the needs and the operational deficiencies are satisfied by that. But I think staff has done just an outstanding job of following the guidance that I feel that we've given them.
Thanks. Commissioner Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. Concur with Commissioner White. I appreciate the work that Mr. Bushhouse and Williams has done to this point, and obviously looking forward to the February meeting. I think to be clear, the focus and the alignment with both addressing the issues that were presented and then aligning these strategies and these options with those resource constraints, I think is really, I feel very positive about what I've seen so far, and looking forward, obviously, to more detail. But the steps and the kind of actions and the strategies and points that you've described tonight, I think really reflect where I think this process should be moving, and I'm very pleased to see it. So can't say much more than Commissioner White did on that point.
You could, but you won't. Anyone else want to ask a question or comment at this juncture? Commissioner Waldeck?
I think we need much more than the HVAC updates, and that's been obvious. We do. The focus has been on a need to upgrade the police station. The comments we get from the public, and I think what we need to identify to the public, the common questions are, if the village hall has too much space and the police station has too little space, why not just do a flip-flop? And so, we need to get to the public with an answer for that. Also, why can't we just add on, put an addition on the police station to meet their needs? And those are the two questions that you hear most from the public, and I think we need to definitively answer why we can or can't do it, or the costs associated with that.
I think we have answers for those for you right here on spot.
Right. Having looked at, like you said, looking at the police station, that was built as a police station, and we believe, pending detailed structural analysis, that it was designed to meet the requirements of a central facility, which means it can handle higher levels of wind, et cetera, and still stay operational. This building, we do not believe, was designed to those standards. Therefore, this building would require real and noticeable improvements to its structure to allow that to happen. Also, there are areas in the police station that are substantially already fit for continued use, substantially as they are. The gun range and the detention area, which are both expensive parts of the building to replicate. They are built out of very heavy, very solid materials. For obvious reasons, you don't want bullets escaping from a gun range, and you don't want prisoners escaping from a detention area. And they have very specific laws that govern how they are built, and they're, near as we can tell, are built correctly. Therefore, to rebuild those areas within a building that never had that kind of solid structure as being part of it would be very, very expensive to replicate those areas. So even though the square footage may be here, we're going to have to rebuild some very expensive things at a higher level of structure than this building has. And we can do some estimating, and we'll certainly look at it further, but it seems extremely unlikely to us that you will save any dollars. In fact, you will probably spend more money trying to swap their uses than to take full advantage of these highly specialized spaces that are built in the police station and let this building remain an office building, which is basically what its structure is adequate for.
In a second-story addition to police.
And to add another
Or
floor,
third story, sorry.
to add another level onto the police, the foundations may be adequate for the additional weight. However, the roof is built as a roof, not as a floor, and there are substantial structural differences between the two. So to turn that into a floor to add another level, we basically have to peel off the entire roof, and with it, of course, everything that's underneath and attached comes off with it, and you expose the entire building to the elements, and which means you have lost most things inside the building. The alternative is to try and build over the building without reworking, pulling that roof off, and that is a very specialized and expensive approach that's only usually done in like downtown buildings where the land costs and so forth are extreme. So adding a third floor to that police station would, especially since you have land area to go next to it, is from our perspective, obviously going to be more expensive and problematic than just going next to it.
Well, thanks for that, because that's a question that I've gotten from the community.
Right.
So that's an answer. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Other questions or comments at this juncture? Bob?
The process thus far is fine. The strategies are something I suspect everybody's going to be in agreement on. They're largely the same strategies as before in the last analysis, but for that last item. All those elements of applying long-range concepts, minimizing space, common solutions, shared uses, avoiding large spaces were all things that we talked about at length the last time, and they remain, irrespective of whatever plan, those need to be strategies that are across the top of the page guiding our decision making. My only concern, I guess, with the process is there's an option that I suppose maybe nobody's got an interest in it, but I'm a little concerned we're constraining ourselves. What I think I'm hearing is the police station is significantly, first of all, expensive to replicate. Secondly, has a lot of elements of it that function, although it's got some deficiencies. But there's a big element of sort of fixed costs, sunk costs that's owned in that facility. This thing, not so much. And so what I wonder is whether or not we ought to also be thinking about, if we've said 16 million is our limit, because we're basing that on existing revenues, what would it look like if this property were still sold? An addition on the police station can be an addition to handle police activities as needed for operations, or it can be an addition with that plus 16,000 feet of office space. There's more, I know there's storage and there's other things, but I hate to sort of pre-eliminate the idea that this resource, this asset here, would not be used in some other way, perhaps funding additional building. If that's something that is too many moving parts, so be it. But we're talking about investing, anywhere from $8 million of systems to $16 million of additional stuff, and I hate to do that. I hate to spend any of those dollars if I don't feel like we've looked at all the possible choices. This building here, there's nothing special about this building but for its location. So I'm a little concerned that we would be eliminating that out of the gate.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to say I like the strategies, I like the options, and I also think it's really important to say what I've heard in the community is that everyone wants the police station and the village hall to stay right where it is. So I think working with what we have is a really good idea. I'm all for updating the police station, remodeling it. They deserve it, they need the help. The community needs it. I don't think it should move, but that's just my opinion. But I like everything that's been laid out so far, and I'm excited to see what the plans bring along, and I'm happy that this is moving along. It's been discussed a lot over and over. I think the community wants it to stay here. I think that's really important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Hope you'll compelled.
Well, I'm going to keep it brief because of that. I think next month is the ballgame. We really haven't learned a whole lot tonight. The presentation was fine. I've got no problem with it, but we knew what the challenges were. it's nice to have confirmation of that from an outside source. But we were all previously pretty much in agreement here on strategies too. What matters is, as the mayor said earlier, how many boxes do we tick off on this list over? And that's going to drive my determination on which option I'm going to support. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the check-in tonight. I don't think anybody is saying that they don't want to find out what's behind curtain number 3. We want to see what's behind curtain number 3. We're going to find out what these resources accomplish on that list and in what fashion. On that note, I think it's important that we quantify what those things mean. Some of them are pretty easy. Window replacement, I think layperson understands what that is. I think some other things such as, well, what's the big deal about lobby area space? Why is that important? I think we need to make sure that when we get to that segment in February, that we have some weighting, if you will, or some quantification assigned to those things. So if we're going to be leaving things outside of the box when the X-Acto knife is drawn around whatever it is we're doing, we know what we're leaving behind and what it means. Conversely, if we find out that these resources don't quite address all those things on that list, not only do we have the information necessary to determine how important or unimportant those things are, but then if we realize, golly gee, we've left some pretty important things off that, unaddressed on that list, you know what, they're still very important, that we can then perhaps look at some ways to address them if, after seeing them, and if understanding their weight, and if understanding other options for either other approaches or other resources, that we feel it's important for this organization, this community to address them. I don't think we're there yet, because nobody's seen any of the drawings and no one's seen any of the dollars associated with them, and we haven't seen the relationship to the weight of those maintenance and operational needs. I think once we see all that, it's going to be a lot easier for this group and the community at large to look and say, oh, well, I understand that we've designed a vehicle that moves across the street, but we're in a mountainous region with lots of snow and ice. It's never going to climb up the hill. In winter, we're going to have to do something else to make sure that actually performs as we need it to. I don't think we're there yet. I think that's February. But I think at that point, just to pick up on Bob's point, I think that'll be the point where if people are going to be willing to figure out, well, okay, now how can we actually address some of these important things that this doesn't allow us to do with these resources, we can talk about ways to possibly do that. But I don't think we're there yet.
If I may, there's a lot of land here, and if somehow it comes out to be economical and working better for the whole project, I think we'd like to see the village hall and the police station somehow connected. If it's an addition and it releases more space that can be used for something else, that would be a good thing. Maybe a little better than a parking lot, but maybe even using some of the parking lot or the underground or something, just make best use of the land, and if there's any surplus, maybe that can help finance a much better, 2 better facilities. I'd like to see them somehow connected as well.
Thanks, Bill. Let me add one other thing that just occurred to me while you were talking. Flexibility, and this actually goes back to your comment earlier about what modern private sector approaches are. Modern private sector approaches are always looking at multitasking. Don't buy 5 tools when you can buy one that does all 5 things. That's important, and that's kind of, I think, where you were going, Bill. But also, to the extent that we can have space that performs a role today, but is also flexible enough to perform a different role tomorrow, I think that's important. We all know that the opportunities for partnerships and things of that nature, or maybe something we do today, 5, 10, 15 years from now, we'll find out can better be done somewhere else. Maybe there are things that others are doing right now separately that we may find that is greatly to our advantage to do here. The combination of our 911 call center with Westmont, for example. I think as much as we can, and maybe this is beyond February, we ought to be thinking of, or it is beyond February, we ought to at least be thinking from the outset of maintaining flexibility to deal with those kind of contingencies down the road. Because I think that will then add a
another layer of utility to what we're getting from these resources. So once again, we're asking you to do everything with nothing.
Just thank you.
That's right.
$16 million.
We asked Dave and Mike to do that every single Tuesday.
That's right. They say and.
Yes.
We did-
And smile when they say it, too.
We definitely want to plan for the future, because we don't want to get in a situation like we have with the fire station, where you start having ladder trucks that just don't fit anymore.
Right.
So,
I'm good.
you gotta think of new technology.
So I think what you're hearing is that everybody wants to get to February. Everyone wants to see the next iteration.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you so much for your counsel.
Well,
You
and
got
then,
what you need.
okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was just going to do that. Questions or comments from members of the audience at this point? I'm going to read in everyone's face, they want to see February too.
Hey, actually,
Please.
Hi. I actually do have a question. You talked about flexibility in the spaces, which is good, but I'm concerned how far this flexibility is going towards that whole concept of hoteling, where the employees don't have a fixed space. And only asking this because I've seen it come into fashion and go out almost as fast, because it just does not work. And I don't want us, at one point I think that we were thinking more about that in some earlier versions of some of these buildings, but I don't want us to get lost in the hoteling track when that's already shown to be impractical, and that employees actually wind up visiting more than they actually wind up working. And that's not the way we want to go. So I was just a little concerned as to where your thought might lie with that.
It wasn't hoteling.
Okay.
It was literally either no longer doing certain functions completely because they can be done better elsewhere in, say, partnership with someone else, or vice versa, where somebody else sees us as a better place to perform a function.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's
but
what I had in
That
mind.
wasn't my, yeah, that wasn't.
I know what you're talking about, and that's not what I was.
Right.
That's not what I'm
Right,
getting at.
and having my husband go through this, where they implemented hoteling in Asia
Yes.
for his company.
That used to be a big thing with the
It
accounting
was
firms.
in and out in 18 months because it was just so atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't want us to get caught up in something like that.
There's balance. People need focused areas to do their focused work, and you
Right.
have to respect that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Please.
I think you kind of answered them. My big concern was with reusing the buildings is, are we just put big Band-Aids on that, you know, are going to have to keep being replaced and then you end up spending more money on the Band-Aids than just starting all over. And I'm assuming that's been taken into, consideration. And also the look to the future of, in 5 years, you're going to do this again, which you can't predict, but you can at least, try. And so those are some things that I'm assuming that have already been taken into consideration.
And will be. Thank you.
I can say that as we program these buildings, the intention is to have the right spaces and enough flexible spaces and enough space for them to carry on their functions for decades to come. Now, if your town suddenly grew another 50% in population, then okay, then so be it, but that's not what's going to happen in Downers Grove. So the ability to plan on growth is much more confined down.
Unless we're going to be like Hong Kong and go up. Other questions or comments from the audience? Well, thank you for your attention. Thank you for continuing to participate. Bill, did you have a
Yeah,
thought?
just somewhere, one of the things that was successful, I think, in the Station 2 process was bringing in, I think it was a committee of employees, so at the appropriate time, I'd like to see something like that, so.
That is a key component of how we operate on a daily basis. We operate by 3 key leadership philosophies. One is communication makes us better. Another is we're tough on issues, easy on people. And the last one is great ideas come from anyone and everyone. the way to do this project and every other project is to get a broad support from everybody who works here. Organizational chart and position has nothing to do with your ability to solve problems. The best people to solve the problems of day-to-day work and interaction are the people that are doing that work. The best people that can explain to Mark how they need to use the space are the people using the space for that function. When we went to dinner with Mark tonight, we talked about exactly that. How do we get the best input from the people who actually use this space? And we had some great ideas that Mark threw out. A lot of them we're doing here, and we can get better at that as well. So it's sort of a trademark of how we roll in Downersville.
Very good. On to February then. Thank you very much.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much and good night.
Wow.